soon so everyone can see them. But I just wanted to start by saying thank you for this opportunity to talk to you at this conference. I've enjoyed the conference so far, and I hope what I will talk about in a moment is going to be useful for you in your publishing journey. As I said, I've got some slides. Hopefully they will appear soon on the screen. And they're talking about publishing in high-quality journals. So some of what I've said has already been covered by the previous speakers. So hopefully by me repeating that a little bit and reinforcing some of these important issues, you'll see just how important they are. Let's see, I'll start off. So I don't know if you can see any slides if you're there in person. They're in kind of black background. Right, so I'll start off by just going through the ones that I can see anyway. So yeah, I wanted to start off by saying we all want to publish. That's good, there's the slide. So on to the next slide, please. Yeah, we obviously all want to publish in high quality journals, and we all want to publish as many papers as we can. So this is the, I guess, the competitive environment that we are in. So can we all win? Can we all do as well as we hope? Well, maybe not, right? This is a very competitive situation, but as the previous speakers have said, the most important thing from my perspective or my experience is persistence, right? So of course, when we submit a paper to a journal, that's not always going to be accepted, all right? Very rarely is the submission going to be accepted. So it's really a matter of being persistent, understanding that sometimes you'll succeed, sometimes you'll fail, right? But you have to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. And then over time, you'll be successful in having a big number of publications. All right, so I'm going to talk about a couple of issues. So you can see there's step one, understanding the journal processes. This is just to explain a little bit about the difference between, if you like, lower quality journal and higher quality journals and how they work. Okay, so next slide, please. Yeah, so for lower quality journals, how do they work? Basically, the editors or associate editors will send pretty much all papers out for review. Okay, and they'll send them to one, maybe two reviewers. The reviewers will actually be friendlier, right? So they'll be from universities all around the world. Generally, they like the paper, so you'll be required to do fewer improvements or fewer revisions, and then acceptance rates of these journals are higher, right? So lower quality journals, I don't mean there's anything wrong with them, right? They're good outlets for research, but just publishing in these journals is a little bit easier than you'll see in the next slide. So the next slide is looking at higher quality journals. Right? As the previous speakers have said, sometimes when you submit a paper to a high quality journal, it will actually be rejected straight away. So it will be rejected by the editors, right? Which means it doesn't get sent out in the normal review process. So this can seem a little harsh or a little difficult, right? But it's just because the journal editors don't have time and resources to send all of the papers out for review. Right, so those papers that make it past that desk rejection stage, right, would be better papers. So they'll be sent out to review, right, in higher quality journals. That can be 2 or 3 reviewers. And usually these reviewers are not so friendly. I guess that's the best way I can put it. Okay, so these reviewers will often have a lot to say, and not all of it will be positive about your research. So that's something we just have to get used to. So in this situation, most papers will end up being rejected. If you're lucky and the paper isn't rejected and you have the opportunity to revise and improve the paper, then yes, it will involve a lot more work than it would at a lower quality journal. All right, so that's just what I wanted to go through. So we understand the differences between lower and higher. Obviously, the higher the quality journal, the more intense those items will be that I just discussed. Right, so how can we succeed then in publishing in higher quality journals? Right, so this next step is preparing your paper. As I mentioned, a lot of this has been covered previously, so I'll just come through and
Okay, Professor Zalaila, you and Professor Nowland, yeah, explain mostly the same things. It's about how publishing in a high impact, high quality journals. Yes, yeah. But I like your presentations. You
The
explain.
slide still?
Oh yeah. Okay, you can continue it, Professor Nowland.
Okay. Right. Well, I guess I'll keep going. So unfortunately, yeah, we will run out of time if I stop. Right. So you may not be able to see the slides, but hopefully they'll pop back up soon. So anyway, the first point I'd like to make is, we need to prepare our paper. So if we want to target a high quality journal, we have to prepare our paper as best as we can. And in my experience, the best way to do that is to present your paper at a conference, at another university, get colleagues and friends to read the paper. Oh, there we go. I think we're back again. So next slide. All right, so we're back in the right place. So yeah, present your paper. The idea about presenting the paper and getting other colleagues to provide feedback and comments on the paper is that, you'll get to understand your paper a little bit better. What is the more important issues, right? What should you focus on, right? Getting comments and feedback will also help to improve the paper. And the idea being that if there's any big problems with the paper, you want to cover those or smooth those out before you submit it to a journal. So it shouldn't be the case that you just put a paper together and then immediately send it to a journal, right? For a high quality journal, that will always end in rejection. Okay, so my advice would be get a paper together, present it at a conference, present it at another university, and then get colleagues or other people that you know to have a look through the paper and give you some comments. These comments are very valuable, right? And then submitting to a good quality journal. Right, I think the slides have disappeared again, but as I said, I think I better continue. Hopefully you can still hear me. So the next part of preparing your paper is just making sure everything is as good as you can be. Okay, so make sure the methodology, empirical analysis is as advanced as possible, right? If you have, there we go. Okay, maybe the previous slide to that one. Yeah, that one. All right, so your methodology analysis can't be simple for a high quality journal, right? You can't just have one model, one way to estimate it, one way of measuring variables. Okay, so you have to measure the variables maybe in different ways. Could be a dummy variable and a continuous variable of measuring things. Have to estimate the regression models in different ways, conduct robustness checks, conduct additional analysis. Right, so really you can't just have one or two tables with results, you have to have many, many tables. Right, then another big important issue for our accounting and finance type research is endogeneity issues. Right, so these can be self-selection, omitted variable bias, causality. Right, these are issues we can't always solve, but the idea here is that these are issues that we need to discuss and try to solve in our paper. Right, so for higher quality journals, basic methodology and analysis won't be acceptable anymore. They'll work fine at maybe lower quality journals, right? But for higher quality journals, you need to show that you've done more work, done better analysis, right? You need to show that you've thought about the problems that could exist in the analysis, right? So try to show there that you've solved as many of these issues as you can before you submit the paper to the journal. Okay, on to the next slide, please. Right, and then writing of the paper, right, as previous speakers have said, the paper needs to be really well written if you want to target a high quality journal. Right, so what do we mean by that? The language has to be good, the story, the motivation, and the flow in the paper. Right, I think these items were covered previously very well today. Right, so it must be obvious why the paper is important, right? How your paper relates to the prior literature, what the implications of your findings are for the academic world and the industry or professional world. Right, most importantly here, the paper cannot have any obvious mistakes. Right, so even little things like spelling mistakes or calling something the wrong table, right, or having things in the wrong place. Why is this important? Because if you have a look down the bottom, right, these are easy reasons for reviewers to reject the paper. So if I'm a reviewer and I'm reading a paper and there's a number of mistakes in there, I'll be thinking, why should I care about this paper? Because the authors obviously didn't care enough to read it and revise it properly before submitting. Right? So you really want to avoid the situation at all costs. Right? You don't want the reviewers to think that you haven't taken enough care in preparing the paper. Right? So spend as much time as you can preparing the paper, make sure it's written well, it flows well, right? And so on. Right? Make sure it's the best possible version that you have, and then you submit it to a high quality journal. Okay, next. Right, the other little suggestion I have here is, how do you get past the editor or associate editor? So the solution here is to write a cover letter to the journal editor, introducing your paper, explaining how good it is, and explaining why it is relevant to their journal. Right? In particular, it's great if you can list papers in the journal that you've cited, right? So papers you've cited in your paper that have been published in this particular journal. Right? So every time you submit to a higher quality journal, this is what I would expect you to do, right? Write a letter saying, this is the paper, this is the title of the paper, this is roughly what it's about. We think this would be a good fit for this particular journal, right? Because we're citing these papers from your journal, right? If you can do that, then obviously this makes it very difficult for the editor or associate editor to just reject the paper, right? Because you've given them perfect evidence there that your paper is relevant to what is being published in their journal. Okay, next, please. Right, then, yeah, this is where I think another important element of publishing comes in. So I think you have to be lucky to get things published. So I've got here, once you prepared the paper is as strong as you can possibly make it. You still need to hope or pray that you'll get a little bit lucky in the review process. So the review process is not perfect. Right? Depends on which reviewers the paper gets allocated to. Some people will be friendlier, some people less friendly. Right? There's no way you can control that outcome. Right? So if you're a little bit luckier, yeah, you'll get some nice reviewers. They will like the paper and they'll help you revise and prepare the paper for publication. Right? If you're not so lucky in a particular situation, you'll get reviewers who don't like the paper and they'll just reject it straight away. Right, what can we do about this as researchers? Well, there's nothing much we can do. So if we have good luck, that's great. If we have bad luck, then we just move on to another journal to submit the paper to. So luckily there's tens or hundreds of different journals out there, right? So if we have some bad luck, that's okay. Be persistent, right? Just continue and send the paper to another journal. Okay, nearly finished. So next one, please. Oh,
okay. Is that all?
That didn't look quite right.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Nowland.
All right. The last thing I wanted to talk about is just, if you do have the opportunity to revise and resubmit the paper, what should you do? Okay, so if you're lucky enough to submit your paper to a good journal, it gets past the editor, sent out to reviewers, reviewers come back and say, yeah, I like the paper, but it needs some improvement in certain areas. Right, so then you have a revise and resubmit at a good quality journal, so congratulations. Right, then you have to go through all of the reviewers' comments, right, address them in as polite a way as possible. Right, so the key thing here is always being polite and professional. You don't have to agree with the reviewers' comments. In most cases, or some cases, you won't agree with them at all. Right, but that doesn't really matter. So if your goal is to get the paper published in that high-quality journal, right, you just have to go with what the reviewer's opinion or suggestions are. Right, so again, I think the slides have disappeared a little here, but yeah, if you're in that revise and resubmit stage, right, never ever. So what you do is be polite. Try your very best to follow the comments of the reviewer. Right, so address each point. If they ask you to do an additional test, go and do the additional test. If they ask you to cite another paper, if they ask you to revise or rewrite a section of the paper, you just go and do it. Right, that's what the reviewer has asked for. Right, what you don't do, I've got this on the last slide, is don't make any extra changes to the paper that you don't need to. Right, so this has happened to me before. Sometimes the reviewer has asked for something and that gets you thinking a bit about doing some extra stuff. Well, don't worry about that. If the reviewer hasn't asked you to do it, then it's not necessary. Right, the other thing that happens occasionally is don't argue with the reviewer. Right, so very important. Right, the reviewer is the one who's holding your paper in their hands. Right, we always want to be very polite, courteous, and professional. If we do disagree with them, just don't say that, right? Leave it unsaid. Okay, so try our best to follow what the reviewer wants. If you do ever have an issue with a reviewer, then you just, you can direct an email or communication to the associate editor or editor, right? And I've never had that experience, but it is possible if you think the reviewer is asking you to do stuff that isn't possible. So I think I'm pretty much out of time. So hopefully you can still hear me and this has all gone well. The connection has dropped in and out a little bit. So yeah, I think that's my advice from my experience. If you do have any questions, please, yeah, start preparing them and then we'll be ready, I think, now for the Q&A session.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Nowland, for your great presentations. And it's time now for you, for the audience.
Right, so back to the panel.
My name is Hermawan. I'm from Setia Cendekia, Bojonegoro. Thank you, Professor. I'm interested to your presentation. There is two questions from me. The first, let's say the viewers don't have much time to read our paper, so which part we can highlight in our paper so the reviewers can see exactly our research. And the second, how if I have a, let's say, independent paper, but not really good in something in media or mainstream, so it is still can receive or not. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Assalamualaikum
warahmatullahi
wabarakatuh.
Yeah. I think you covered the questions very well. So I think, yeah, for the first question, all parts of the paper are important. But I would just say in my experience, I generally spend more of my time writing the abstract and introduction. So as a researcher, that seems to be where I focus a lot more of my attention, right? Writing the title, the abstract, the introduction, right? So that's what I would say for the first question. The second one, yeah, about artificial intelligence, this is definitely a new area, and I think we're all learning as we're going about exactly what we think may be appropriate or not. So I think this can and will evolve over time, but yeah, as you said, for the moment, I think what would be allowed is using AI to help us do particular tasks. So I think that would be acceptable. Now, exactly what tasks and how much help, yeah, this is where it becomes more difficult. So for the moment, I think, yeah, we just want to make sure we are producing the paper ourselves. Obviously, we can get a little bit of help in some areas, right? But we need to be careful in how much help that might be. And then from a reviewer's perspective, I think most of the reviewer situations now are set up, as you said, with using Turnitin and things like that to catch people who have copied sentences and paragraphs from other papers. So how effective that will be in catching people using ChatGPT, I'm not exactly sure, but I would assume that ChatGPT would also copy sentences and paragraphs. So I think it would be quite effective. The journals that use Turnitin and those sort of tools, I think they would be effective against regular copying and AI copying.